Welcome everyone, I'm Robert Watts and I'm going to be playing around with Prismacolor tonight, and some of this stuff has already been on Instagram, but what I'm going to show you, first of all we're working on Canson paper, which is a little different than what I normally work on, which is a Strathmore paper that comes in a tablet form, but it's pretty close. And in this particular situation you see here is from a graphic novel that I'm working on, the Blunt Force Saga. And this is a key scene from that particular story. So I've been working on it, and I'm going to show you. This is my typical sketchbook that I work on, just sitting on the sofa and coming up with things. So this was the original pencil, and to save you the grief of having to watch me recreate that pencil, I scanned it and printed it onto the Canson paper so we could skip that step. But you understand that I would typically be working over a number 2 pencil drawing on this same paper. The technique is, I'll show you a couple of examples real quickly. I'm not going to show you too many. This was a ship design for an Edgar Rice Burroughs novel, Pirates of Venus. You see there's all kinds of various and sundry things that you can do. There's really no limit to the technique. It's pretty flexible, and you get a nice version of finished art without the, all the pain of dealing with paint and all of that nonsense. So anyway, this one has been on Instagram recently. This is going to be one of the ships that appears later in the story. So anyway, our first exercise here, this whole thing takes place obviously way out there in space and 700 years in the future. So this is a large mining transport vehicle, commercial vehicle. This is one of the enemy attacking ships that one of the people on board, the chief engineer, had cleverly designed a weapon to deal with. He originally designed it to work with asteroids. So anyway, what we're seeing here is they have tied this ship up alongside. We're looking at it from below. This ship is enormous. This is probably from here to the top of the ship is probably around 30 stories. So it's really large. We're going to have a rising sun here on the horizon of the planet below. So that's probably enough talking about this thing, and we need to get down to work. This ship here, by the way, this was a rough sketch that I did early on, and it hasn't really changed too much yet. I was looking for something very organic looking. Kind of looks like a potato, I know, but I didn't want to follow any conventional designs. So that's the bad guy. So we'll start by figuring out what's going to be warm and what's going to be cool and what's going to be in shadow. And I'm going to pick like just kind of a medium blues, a little shorty. I typically sharpen my pencils on both ends so I don't have to keep running to the pencil sharpener.
Bob, while you're doing that, would you mind mentioning a little bit about what kind of palette you're using in terms of colored pencils?
Well, it's probably easier to show you this is the whole Megillah here. And I've got this kind of segregated into greens and blues and yellow, oranges, and reds, and all the really pastel colors at the extreme end. I also use a rot ring pen for the pen and ink portion, and that looks like this. And when you take the tip off, you get kind of a fountain pen looking thing. Really a nice pen. The ink, very reluctant to clog, doesn't skip too much. Seems to work okay over the top of the Prismacolor pencil. So we'll give this a shot and see how it works today. I'm gonna start by putting a little bit of blue along this side. Now the sun that's coming up over the edge of the planet is going to basically give us a rim light on most of this stuff and a little bit maybe on the bottoms of some of these parts. This is the propulsion system here at the end. It's the same on all of the ships that are in the story. So anyway, I'm going to go ahead and put a little bit. I don't have a real formula for how I put color on, which is going to be annoying as hell for all you people. But I go with just, it's basically working with warms and cools and shadows and highlights. And so I also try to transition colors. So I don't stay with one for too long. I'm going to put a little bit of this violet color in here just to add a little bit of, and this will be a slow riser. This will not pop right off the page here immediately. It'll take a little while for this to actually come to fruition. It's always pretty scary because I normally do this on a sofa in a really totally relaxed mode, and one of these things will typically take me about 3 hours to do, something like that, 2 to 3 hours. And there's no pressure or anything, but see, now I got to explain how this whole thing works and try to come up with some kind of logic that you guys can wrap your head around. Okay, so we're just trying to isolate some areas that are going to be in shadow and the ones that aren't. So I'll get a little bit of this, and I'm going to take a little bit of this same purple, and I'm going to start. This ship here has been damaged by a weapon that the guy on board this ship kind of home built. He used to be a weapons guy with the Space Navy, so he's pretty bright. And he came up with this little gizmo to deal with asteroids, and along came the end. In 700 years, they had not seen any sign of life anywhere. And they were already out 208 light years into the galaxy. So the story's kind of interesting because this is the first time anybody's seen anything, caught them totally off guard. So we're starting to get a little bit of the effect of light and shadow on this. I'm having to wing it because obviously there is no reference on this. This is totally invented. I've drawn this particular ship, a number of times, so it's starting to feel like something that I can draw, like I suppose Stan Lee drew his character. But you get familiar with it, so you can kind of fake it from almost any angle after a while. Okay, so this purple's just kind of a nice neutral semi-dark that seems to work pretty good for kind of a base color that you can throw in. I'm on the back side of a cold, so I've got a little bit of like laryngitis, so you'll pardon if I sound a little strange. Hopefully it won't get much stranger, but you never know. And what you do with this is that right now it's got no punch. The thing that really will actually give the illustration punch will come much later when we start to use the rot ring ink pen to get a little bit more contrast and snappiness to the whole thing. We've got to build up to that because you don't want to, if you start going back and doing the Prismacolor over the top of the pen and ink, which I do sometimes, it dulls it and you have to go back and you have to redraw over your own drawing, and that's fairly tedious. So you try to keep that to a minimum so you don't have to do it a whole bunch. The pencil that's underneath, in this particular case, it's printed on a wide body printer very lightly on this Canson paper. This Canson paper is just absolutely outstanding stuff. But it's not the paper I typically use. And that doesn't usually, I've been doing this for so long that I'm fairly flexible, and I can make a change in materials without too much really big nightmare action going on. So you can see I'm working with a little bit darker blue-violet now to, the thing that's great about Prismacolor, there's a lot of things great about Prismacolor, but their selection of colors is just absolutely out of this world. And I've tried other competing brands, and they just don't they just don't work the same. They're close, but no cigar. Okay, there's really no atmospheric perspective out in space here, but you can always feel free to introduce that on your own, and nobody will be the wiser. Okay. It's kind of nice to make sure that you don't, everything isn't as dark in the distance as it is up close. That's kind of an earthbound thing that our eyes and our brains are used to. But it's nice to not let it completely go away, even though out here everything is going to be, under normal conditions, crystal sharp. Now, if you get a situation where you say, oh, I put too much Prismacolor on, you can just go back and just kind of lift it out with a kneaded eraser a little bit. You say, that's better, so. And I may, from time to time here, come back in and actually, like right now, I'm gonna put a little bit of the pen and ink in here so you can see what this will do to the crispness of the whole thing. So you see, it's got pretty significant effect on the whole thing. Okay, so that will be the end of that little quick demo there. Okay, put that aside and we'll get back to putting a little bit of light value on the front of this thing. So I think I'm going to go down here to our rising sun now. And this is no different from the process that I use for this. It's no different from when I'm doing a painting, really. You want to keep moving around the picture. Don't stay in one spot too long. You end up with, a wonderful pair of eyebrows and nothing else working in concert with it. So you got to keep moving all over the picture and bring it up all together in one big sweep. And that's where you get the best results. So we're going to get a little bit of warmth in the picture now here, and we're going to brighten that up a lot, but for right now, I'm just going to get a little kiss and a blush of what's going to happen here so that we can also feel free to get a little bit of reflection from the surface down below, which I think will be useful, and I'm going to put a little of that in right now. So this, like the purple, that violet that I was using earlier, this is kind of a tonal wash, if you please, over the picture to kind of represent everything that's getting a bit of warmth in it. And the planet is going to be bouncing some light up into this, and even if it didn't, I would do it just out of spite, I guess. One of the things that is a little bit restrictive about this technique with the Prismacolor pencil, something that you have to remember, and it forces you to be a really honest artist, because if you draw this separately on a piece of tracing paper, work it all out, and then transfer it down, you will leave little grooves in this expensive paper. And when you put Prismacolor over it, it will not fill in those little spots. You'll get these little lines in the picture that'll look really terrible. So the only way to do this is the real honest to God way. And you've got to get in there and really know how to draw and do it. One of the things that I've always been fortunate enough to be fairly good at fairly easily was perspective. So it never caused me any big problems. I know it, for some of you at least, it probably is a stinker. And I'm going to use this ruler to get a little bit of a nice clean line on a couple of things that are going to catch light a bit.
So, Bob, we've got somebody asking about some possible exercises for understanding color a little bit better.
The understanding color. I did this little quickie thing here where, and I'll redo this thing and I'll show you how this kind of works. So I started with this. This color is, what is it? Sable in Prismacolor. And I'm just going to do a little curving line of tone that goes from, you notice I'm working with the side of the pencil and not the tip. Keep that in mind. It's just like in life drawing where you're much better off to use the side of the pencil. Let it hold it like this rather than to hold it like this. When you do this, you just do bad things. So, I mean, you do engineering drawings when you do that. So that's not what we're actually into here. Okay, so I'm going to put this this is, heaven only knows, cloud blue. And I'm going to just run a little of that over the top of the tan, that light yellow ochre color. Okay, and then once you get that done, then you can move to a white or a cream to give it the last little bit of fire. So that's the way we work with the stuff on this. The middle value of the paper is enormously important because with it you can get highlights. If you work on white paper, the white paper is your highlight. So you have to paint or draw or color in everything but what you want to be the highlight. So that can be a little tricky.
So in terms of making color choices with this drawing right now, what is some of your reasoning with choosing the colors you've chosen so far?
Well, the one thing, if you'll notice here, it's a subtle thing, but the purple and the gold are complements. So yeah, yellow and purple are complements. So, and since this is a very grayed purple and this is a very grayed yellow, the two actually they're equal in value and they are roughly complements. But it's mostly one of those things where I've never considered myself to be a genius in color. It's not one of my absolute strongest suits, because I mean there are some people out there that are really, really inventive with color and not afraid to use it all. And I'm working my way towards that. God knows, a little bit late in life to be working your way towards anything, but it's one of those things where I basically, you want to transition in color. So, you know, I want warm and cool for starters, which I've got. And then I may decide to take something like a burnt sienna-ish color, red ochre, and transition this purple up into yet another color. And you don't need, there's really no particular science to this. Now, I mean, I'm not exactly like in what I'm doing today, we're not restricted like we are when you're drawing a still life of a peach, for instance. Well, it's got to look like a peach, or it isn't going to look like anything. It's going to look like a billiard ball off a pool table. So with the science fiction, with this kind of thing, or with creature design or alien environments or any of those things, you're pretty much free to start freelancing your color relationships. But warm and cool is always really important. I'm going to put a little bit of this. And see, I really don't know where this thing is going color-wise. I know where it has to go lighting-wise. But everything else, I'm just kind of having fun with it, and we'll see what happens here. It's, I know that's not terribly instructive, but it does work. And if you don't have any eye for a need for a change in a color or a hue, you've already got a big problem. You know, it's kind of like if you have shaky hands, you're not going to make a very good surgeon. So if you don't start, and I'm not saying that you should right now, at this particular, whatever point your career is in right now, that you should be really, really good right now or you should give it up. No, that's not what I'm saying at all. I'm just saying that you should be aware of the fact, at least, that your color is not real good. That's a sure sign that you have some artistic value, you know, as a person, that you can sense that something's wrong with your work. That's the first step towards making it right. Okay, so I'm just trying to get a little bit of volume to this little stinker here. I'm going to go ahead and come back in, and I have no idea how long this is going to take. I've got 3 things prepared to work on, but I'm realistically, if we get 2 of them done, we'll be really lucky. But you never know.
So probably more than an hour on each?
Yes, I would suspect. It's, you know, and it may not take that long, but we have to allow for some of the inconsistencies and the unexpected things that can happen, good or bad.
Bob, can you talk a little bit about your process and how you decide when to move on to a more developed sketch or a final or even gouache?
Are you talking about taking this out of Prismacolor and into something else?
Or the step before this and how long you would work on that?
I've done a series of drawings on this ship at this point, and so I'm fairly comfortable with it now. And in each iteration, it goes through a little bit of a design change. And I don't know if there's a good answer to that exactly. I know that it started out as kind of a chubby little ship, and it's become more streamlined and elegant now. And I'm going to actually be going backwards from this reasonably finished piece of work to the graphic novel stage, where it goes back to black and white and very graphic and very bold. So we're going to, the graphic novel thing is a first for me. I had never done anything along those lines before, but I found it to be utterly intriguing. So it's a brand new thing, and then I'm having to work out with the sound balloons and all of the other nonsense that goes with that particular idiom. Let's see, I think I'll put a little line. I gotta leave that, not get in the way of that smoke that's curling up. And whether smoke would actually curl up or not is anybody's guess, but good science fiction illustration like Star Wars, they never worry about how do they manage to stay on the floor when they walk, when you can't do that in space. So it's we're going to concentrate mainly on having fun with this thing and not making a realistic nightmare out of the whole thing. Okay, so with this now, this is quite in model building. These little things that I'm putting on here are called greeblies. They're just little stuff that looks like piping and forms and shapes. And I'm really, like I was telling Lucas, I'm really comfortable with hardware. That's a little bit more so than I am with people. I'm okay with people, but I don't fancy myself as being an expert in that area. But with hardware, I'm reasonably good. I started out in aerospace, so I got an early learning along these lines. And I went to Art Center and Pratt Institute in New York, the 2 schools. One for graphic design, which was Pratt Institute. Of quickly decided that I like drawing and painting better than designing logos, although it has served me well nonetheless.
Robert, we have somebody asking a question on how to keep a clean sketchbook and how you do that yourself. Repeat the question if you can, because I think they can't quite hear me.
How to keep a clean sketchbook. Excuse me. The work from the top down. If you're right or left-handed, keep that obviously in consideration. And if you're right-handed, like I am, start up in the upper right-hand corner and work over and then down so that you keep your hand off the top of the work that you've spent so much time doing. Picking a medium that doesn't blur, smear, like you wouldn't want to do a sketchbook in charcoal. Bad idea. Graphite is almost as bad. You'll end up, after a few months of your book closed, you'll end up with a negative image of the drawing that's on the right-hand side over on the left-hand side of the other page. So it's a kind of a sticky deal, but one thing that you can do is you can draw lightly. And I use mostly just a simple number 2 pencil like you would take to a class to take notes. Not very sophisticated, is it? But works really good. And use some other medium. I mean, you can do it all in pencil if you want. Just have to be very careful. But I would actually use something like Prismacolor to throw in my shadows and my tones after I did a light drawing in pencil. That's an excellent way. You can also use ballpoint pen, pen and ink, some kind of a more permanent medium. The price that you pay for that is you've got to be awfully good, or you end up with some very permanent bad drawings on your page and you have to tear the sheet out so you can live with yourself. It's not a lot of fun. A good sketchbook is a real art form. It is a real honest-to-God art form. And I try to, these days, wasn't always this way, I try to keep my every page in the book. So I try not to tear anything out. I usually don't tear out more than 1, 2 at the most out of a 50-sheet book. But the keeping it clean, much of it is staying out of your own work. In other words, not running your hands over the top, just leaning your hand over the top of what you've already done. It's kind of common sense, but learning how to use the spaces on your page, kind of an acquired skill.
So a little bit of composition.
It is a compositional thing, you know, with the way you arrange things on a page so that they don't annoy each other. I want this little bit of smoke coming off here, not to change the subject, but to be a little bit more intense than some of the other things that are happening in the picture. But I'm not going to make it. Now, the absolute shape of that is where composition and learning how to do random comes into the picture. And it's a skill that you absolutely must learn to. But all of these things, they just develop in parallel with one another as your career moves along. You don't all of a sudden get this ability to do everything just right. You get a little bit better at random, you get a little bit better at color, you get a little bit better at drawing, you go back and get a little bit better at random again than you were before, and you get a little bit better at color than you were before, and you keep bouncing back and forth. But the important thing is to keep a sharp eye out on what you're generating, and practice on the parts that you need work on. Because like this random thing, smoke is a random thing, which it really has no specific shape or any pattern or anything you can follow or predict. So, I mean, on Earth it rises, but space, who knows? But You just got to just practice the things that you don't do very well and work on them a lot. And at the bottom of all of this, obviously, is just good drawing. That's the one that makes everything else possible. You can be just really good at drawing, and you'll never have to deal with color at all. I mean, you can make a living just being good at drawing and just adding the color in as it works into your schedule. You know. Let's see. I want you to add purple again.
Robert, we've got somebody asking. Robert Green's asking if we can hear a little bit more about your graphic novel. What kind of inspired you to start it? And
oh, well, what inspired me to do a graphic novel? That's a really good question. I started out, oddly enough, I mean, I've been an illustrator for all these years.
and what's it called?
Oh, it's called The Blunt Force Saga, Episode 1. And I started out just with a crazy notion of just writing a small novella, which is like a 70 or 80 page novel, short novel. And I got into this thing and I discovered, I said to myself, what are you thinking about? You're not a writer, you idiot. You know, you draw pictures. And I said, well, maybe I better re-engineer this whole concept and let's turn the novella into a graphic novel instead, which focuses more on the things that I am supposedly better at. And so now I don't have to write quite so much, and I can put more of the emphasis on designing pages and doing drawings. It's coming along pretty well. I got a new iPad, one of the big ones, with a pencil, and Clip Studio, and I've been wading through that, and that's the latest craziness that my wife is having to put up with from me. You know, I every now and again oh God, he's reinvented himself again. Oh, good Lord, how long is this going to go on? But it really, it's very important to keep pushing yourself outward and doing things that you're really uncomfortable with or that you've never tried before. I think we're getting okay with that. So I put a little.
So this is a story that's kind of a scale that you've never attempted before?
Oh, absolutely not. No, I have taught classes on telling the story.
We've got some students talking about Dune as one of their favorite sci-fi stories. What are some of your favorite stories that have inspired you?
Oh, let me see. Oh, my goodness. I'm not sure that any of them have probably been made into movies. I've been a big fan. I mean, Isaac Asimov, almost anything he did. Starship Troopers by Heinlein was real good. Of the things that have been made into motion pictures, there aren't too many. I mean, obviously there's Alien, which is great. You know, they got enough believability in that one and enough fantasy to keep you really interested in the story. But Dune is a good one. I mean, I enjoyed that too. The movie came out about 400 years too early before they had the CG to pull off some of the stuff they were trying to do. It still was pretty good, but it would have been even better if they could have done the stuff a little bit better. Let's see, I don't know if there's, 2001, I liked that a lot. Although it moved deadly slow. I vowed to myself that I was never going to do anything that moved that slowly, professionally in my life anyway. And but the story was good, and Arthur Clarke's anything he does is really good. He did some really good stories that would have made great science fiction, but they never were done. But I think that's probably true of a lot of the really good books. Things like there was a book called Starship by Brian Aldiss. Really wonderful story about a whole bunch of people that boarded a spaceship for a distant star, and it was going to be like several generations, and then they'd all arrive at the spot, and they'd all be, the third generation down the line would be ready to go, except the whole thing fell apart in the meanwhile, and it turned into a mile-long tube full of jungle. And it was really one of those things that would make a terrific story, but nobody ever did it. They don't do the good ones, you know, because that's kind of the way it goes, I guess.
This is backtracking a little bit, but
yeah.
You mentioned earlier that there's no atmospheric perspective in space.
Yeah.
So what are some tricks and tools that you can use, maybe with the materials, to add depth to something that's like a presentation piece like this?
Sure. I think what I'm going to actually want to do is I'm going to want my darker values at this end and lighter stuff at that end. And we'll see how that works out. But that's the goal at this case, at this particular point. At this point in this particular case, to clarify that last mumbling remark. Okay, so I'm going to get a little bit, now I'm going to get another level of brightness into this thing so that we can start to get a little bit more excitement into it. I'm not going to be super duper careful with these little transitions right now till I get a little bit further down the pipe with it, but go back in and use the side of the pencil for this because it's just a much better tool for getting these. This paper is a little bit more textural than I'm accustomed to, so I'm having to deal with that.
Yeah, we had somebody mention that there's grooves in the paper.
There are little horizontal grooves. It's just part of the style of the paper, and you say I can either live with that or I can't. Now, what I had to do is that the sketchbook is 11 by 14, something like that, and it wasn't quite big enough for our purposes here tonight. So what I did was I went out and bought some Canson paper and mounted it down on a piece of white illustration board.
Is it a specific type of paper? Is it the Métier?
I don't know what they call it, but I think there's really only one Canson paper. They have a couple of textures to it, and depending on which side you print it on, one side's a little smoother than the other, but for the same reason that I printed my pencil drawing onto this to avoid you having to suffer through me going through a complete pencil drawing first before I could even start to talk about the Prismacolor. So that was the reason for that little maneuver. So let's see, where's my eraser? Got a little slip up there on the end. I'm used to spinning my paper around, but because we've got this thing on video here, I don't want to keep rotating the drawing around. So it makes my job a little bit more harrowing to have to always work at one orientation. But it'll work. It'll be okay.
How did you settle on the design for the ship?
It was one of those things. It's kind of like if you can write a song, it comes to you in the dark of the night. It just you start messing around with things, and like I say, I've always been reasonably good at hardware, and some people aren't. Some people are really good at better at inventing dragons and Walking Dead and other things. It just happens to be my slightly stronger area, and I guess I was with an industrial design, roomed with an industrial design guy at Art Center, so I got all his stuff infiltrated my brain while I was there. So
we've got people asking also for some of the specifics of the ship, the large sphere in the back of the ship. We were talking about this earlier, but could you explain what that is and why?
Yeah, that's their magic drive system, and it's on all the ships that are in this story, and it's called the light pusher drive. And we don't go into the whys and wherefores of it. The ship holds 70,000 tons of ore. The story takes place 208 light years from Earth, on the edge of the fringe. They call it the fringe. It's our arm of the galaxy that we're in, which is a spur of a bigger arm. And these guys are way out at the edge, and they're mining. They have 15 outposts scattered across about 50 light years. And these ships can travel a quarter of a light year a day. So they're really quick. But that doesn't end the isolation, because it can still take like 4 months to reach one of the outer outposts from this large space station that they have on the fringe, which is where it keeps track of everything, and that's mainly Navy people. Mainly, not exclusively. That's where, and the blunt force all comes from a, I hate to tell everybody everything about the story, because it might be
no spoilers, man.
desperately boring, but it's called biofistenics, BF, and soldiers being what they are, they quickly said, we're the blunt force, BF, you know, and the Fistenic was a guy named Dietrich Fisten, and he was the one that determined a way to pair. Most of you are, I'm assuming, are familiar with pairing. To pair a soldier or a commander with his equipment, so that the equipment, it's called telecog responsiveness. And so what it does is the machine knows what you're thinking as soon as you think it. And so you don't have to tell the thing to do something, it does it. And so what happens in this story to make the whole thing interesting is, I didn't want a simple invasion, and I won't tell you where the invasion comes from, except that they think it's coming from two identical directions opposite each other. So a lot of trickery's been pulled off here. And what they have figured out is a way to interfere with that transference of the telecog transference. So the Navy, all of a sudden now, all their weapon systems are of no use. They have to go back to manual and, you know, pull the trigger again, like the good old days. So this one engineer on this ship, which is the Black Star, it's a huge mining ship, and it visits all these outposts, carries the stuff back to the space station, where it's offloaded onto a robotic barge that takes it back in towards Earth. Okay, and then it goes back out for another load. And so these guys, the loneliness and the isolation is just incredible out here on the edge. And it's a long ways from Earth. I mean, it's 10 months to the middle, the spot halfway from here to Earth.
So would you say that a lot of your design choices and the shapes of the ship come from this story that is not so visual at first?
Yeah, I mean, I'm trying to build all this stuff together into a piece, and I've got. I think if you go to Instagram, the thing I continually put new images on there and describe them ever so briefly, what they're all about. But we'll eventually get this thing, hopefully, into a complete story.
Do you have any ideas as to how you'd like to release the story? Are you wanting to?
It's got to be self-published, but you know, I mean, I'm not sure whether there is a, you know, I'm not, you know, sure, everybody like to make money on things, but I mean, I'm having a lot of fun doing this thing, and I'm not really, so I may do it in some other form that is not money hungry. You know, I'm not sure yet. Getting it published and printed, that could be a problem, you know, because everybody wants to get published, and most people, maybe even this, not worth publishing. Who knows? We'll see. But But it's a brand new experience, because I've been an illustrator for many years. I've done practically everything. And this was a chance to do something brand new. And I'd never really gotten into comics or graphic novels at all. And now that I've started working on it, it's been really exciting and fun. So anyway, I'm going to go in here and we're going to try to speed this up just a touch here.
While you're doing that,
Yeah.
could you talk a little bit about how you mounted that paper onto that board? Is it just an
Type 77 adhesive from
spray adhesive?
Yeah, spray adhesive, and you want to do it outdoors, absolutely, and hold your breath the entire time that you're doing it. That's really good stuff, but you don't want to coat the inside of your lungs with it. I mean,
That's the 3M spray adhesive?
yeah, type 77, and you spray one surface, the back of this, and I usually put little pencil marks on the board at the corners. So when I bring it back in, I put one corner down, get the other corner down, then you spread this out. And you need a little roller to burnish it out nicely. But you can create your own colored paper illustration board this way. So it's kind of cool. It's really neat. It's good. Let's see now. Oh, I got to go around here. I started out with these. I've changed this little ship since I did this drawing, but it no longer has these funny little round louvered openings in it, but that you don't care. I know you don't care. So I'm going to have to block this little drawing with my head for just a second to get this. Okay. And we're going to go back into this little thing, and I'll add some more, a little bit more exciting color to this as we finally get this thing. Let's see, I don't know if I want to do anything right there. I think I'll let that go for now.
Robert, have you finished any individual pages for the graphic novel at all?
I have, but I don't have them. I don't have any of those with me. They're all on my iPad, which doesn't really copy well for the camera. Doesn't seem. But I'm going to be putting a few of those on Instagram by and by here, probably within a couple of weeks. Some of them are pretty well along, even with a little bit of cryptic dialogue that you won't understand the significance of it all. But they're basically, the one deals with the first, one of the pages I have absolutely finished is deals with the first sighting of one of these things. They knew this was coming for 8 months, but they didn't know what was coming. They've never seen anything alive at all, in 700 years of star travel. And so you can see that they weren't prepared for this at all. And so what happens is that there's one of the mining bases that's fairly close to the big space station, which is kind of their home away from home, out on the edge of nowhere. And it's like a mile long, and it's got 70,000 people that are stationed on it. It's basically their little piece of home out in the middle of nowhere here. But for many of these outposts, it's a 3-month journey to get to that little piece of home. So it's really scary out there. So it's got all the makings of a really good situation. And then in this one place that's only 3 days away from the big space station, it's the nearest outpost to it, 3 days at light speed. It's better than light speed, actually. But they're the first ones to see anything. And one of their robot prospecting vehicles, they find a debris field where it was, and all melted, screwed up, scattered all over the place. And they're really scared, of course, because this has never happened before. They just thought they were lonely. Now they're lonely and scared. So, and the Navy, typical of governments, they don't tell anybody about this. They know way ahead of time, but they don't warn anybody that something's coming. So they're totally unprepared when they finally find out about it. So anyway, and there's a surprise ending to the thing, which I of course won't say anything about, but
No spoilers, please.
and in fact, even the invasion is much different than everyone thinks. If you think it's an invasion, they really don't know what it is. Just a whole bunch of stuff coming at them like a bat out of hell, and and because the distances are so great, it took 8 months for the stuff to arrive from the time they figured out anything was coming. And when the thing that told them that something was coming was 2 months late because of the distances involved, because not everything can go faster than fast. So it's an interesting little thing to. I wanted something that I could design it. I mean, it's a huge ego. Everybody's like that. I don't want to do what somebody else wants me to do. I want to do what I want to do. And so I figure after this many years, I've earned that. So that's where I'm at on this thing. Okay, so we're getting better.
Just a quick question on practicing in general, but if you know you need to get better, but you're not really sure what to study, what are some things that are kind of just always a good thing to study?
First of all, start working on composition, and so, in addition to just learning how to draw things, just stuff. When you in all the classes that I teach, and most of them are the more advanced and more nerve-wracking classes around here. People get right down with a little sharp pencil and start drawing eyelashes and things, and you really need to get much better at figuring out how does this whole thing look on the page. What kind of compositional motif can I best use to make this really work? And so studying composition, and you can get a lot of help on composition from the motion picture industry, from cinematography. And Google is just like full of stuff. You can ask any question you want about cinematography and get 100 images of things that deal specifically with that. But I think that really the outside of there's probably 3 major things that you need. Excuse me. Bad cold. You need compositional skills. You obviously need drawing skills. So that's 2. And the third one is a little bit of knowledge of perspective. Now, by that I don't mean that you look at all these scary books on it and just get a handle on vanishing points and get a little bit better at perspective. Because if you can't get perspective approximately handled, and there are many software programs that can assist you in that regard this day and age, which were not available when I first started. You can, for instance, things like you can take a photograph that you really like the look of and take 2 parallel lines and find out where they converge, and you end up with a vanishing point for that. So you can literally steal your perspective from another photograph that's already been done. And that saves you all of that intricate learning process. But it's very important for you to learn a little bit about, because if you don't understand perspective at all, you don't know where to put the camera, and the camera is where your eye is. And so this is no different than making a movie. When I picked this one, and the perspective here is admittedly fairly daunting, you can't place your camera there, so you're stuck. The that you can't get to the most dramatic spot to look at the scene because you don't know enough about perspective to make that happen. And so a little bit of attention to perspective would probably be a really good thing. But your drawing skills are going to be the key thing. I mean, it's like, and you don't have to draw the most amazing things in the world either. You can start with just start with anything around you. The chair in the corner of the room, and just get to the point where you can draw that reasonably faithfully with no problem. And that is the big key. And everyone thinks, and I did too. I mean, the only reason I can preach this stuff because I have been where you are and I have done that. I was at the point where I thought that just the neat look and the technique was everything. I didn't have to know anything about good drawing or perspective or composition or any of these things. I could just copy this person and my stuff would look really cool too. Well, it doesn't work that way. And so, you know, it's going to be a journey for you. I mean, for sure. I mean, even if you're pretty good right now, it's going to be a fair journey to get to really good. And with the nature of this big interconnected thing that we're in the middle of right now, is that there are so many people getting the same information you're getting. At one time, you might have been the only person in the Western United States to get this message. Not now. And so the competition level is kicked up. And so there's, don't waste any time. Boy, get on it. Get hot on it right now. We've got some good courses. I mean, we spent a lot of time trying to, and this sounds like merchandising, and I hate that kind of talk. But I'll speak only for myself. I have spent a lot of time on the composition and staging, designing the environment, going to do one on storytelling. These are really important things to have under your belt. And if you don't start working on the composition thing, because in all the classes I teach, even people that are really pretty good at drawing, I give them a compositional problem and they stare at the paper like a dead person. You know, it's really difficult to get to the point where someone says, okay, this is what's happening. That pirate ship is firing a broadside at the ship next to us. We're about, I think the most dramatic spot is probably if you were about 150 feet in the air looking down on this thing happening. And it's just like I was talking pigeon talk to them. It doesn't sink in. So if you have problems with that, you're not alone. I mean, it's difficult.
So you would say, when in doubt as to what to study, composition and perspective are pretty much inescapable.
Oh, they are inescapable. Yeah. I mean, it's. Even if you say, well, I want to do dragons. You know, the dragon's got to be somewhere. It doesn't just. It's not just floating on a gray sheet of paper forever. You've got to get in there. And so I'm going to stop talking for 1 second about that. I'm lightening that up just a little bit because I don't want these to get in front of this. So a little bit of erasing.
So we've talked a little bit about what you've been thinking about while you're doing this drawing. This is a two-part question.
Yeah.
What are you thinking about while you're doing this drawing, and what is it that makes an artwork visually appealing? So we've talked story and composition, perspective. Okay,
first thing is a decent drawing of a decent shape, something that you like to look at. That's the first thing. Yeah, if it's an ugly thing, all the wonderful rendering in the universe is not going to do us any damn good at all. The second thing is lighting. Okay, that's the next little adventure. Once you get perspective and composition together, oh heck, we have to light this thing. So at this point, then all of a sudden we have some interest in that area as well. So how do I most dramatically light a ball? You know, I mean, what is the, you know, just as one for instance. So this this business quickly expands to be a whole lot more things. I mean, there's only about 10,000 different disciplines involved in creating a really good image. So yeah, like number one, it has to be good and pleasing to look at, aesthetically pleasing. Second, the composition and the point of view. Where do I look at this wonderful, beautiful thing from that looks best? Then where do I put the light bulb that's going to light this thing, that's going to explain the forms the best for me? And the last step in the puzzle, in addition to some interesting color, is going to be a full value range. So somewhere I need good darks somewhere in the picture. If you don't have a really good light and a good dark, nothing's going to happen. Anyway.
So what about this image is interesting to you? You know, obviously it's your story, so there's an element that you just like, you're already kind of interested in that.
Well, one of the things that compositionally and perspective-wise, what I'm also trying to do is to make this giant ship loom over me and have mass and have weight and positioned oddly on the page, but with counterbalancing angles. And so I'm going to add a couple of things to this up in here, because this is falling towards the left. That's its natural tendency. These things are helping. This bright spot here on the limb of this planet helps to stop that slide downhill. So if this were not here, the thing would just slowly sag off the picture. This stops that, but it doesn't do it completely. So what we need to do next is we need to get a little vaporous, I'm going to use a little bit of this same color to begin with, just to get it to transition out. A little bit of nebulous gas, and we're going to add some stars in there, and we're going to try to make this thing feel like it's space out here.
You were talking earlier about, what did you call it, Greeble?
These little doodads that are in here, yeah.
We have somebody asking about sci-fi things in particular, but how do you find a good balance of visual activity, like that kind of more visual noise with those Greebles, and then the kind of spaces between?
Yeah, it's a very important thing. You do not want to. It's like every other aspect of our craft. You do not want to overdo anything. If you put too much, you need places where the eye can rest and get some relief from what you've been taxing it with. And so, very important to kind of collect all those little interesting things in specific areas, not have them everywhere in the picture. So in many of these little sections down in here, I'm going to attempt to kind of come and go. So I don't want to fill these laboriously with a ton of this stuff. And if I do, I want to make most of it the same color, or at least the same value. So I'm gonna put some of this stuff in here, and these are just little doodads that make us think we're actually seeing something really significant in here, but and you can hold much of it with a few straight lines and add just a few little pieces along the way, and you start to get the feeling of what you're after in this thing. So
could you talk a And also, I'm curious as to how visual weight plays into balance and compositional balance, and even balance between detail and simplicity and all that.
Okay, well, there's a couple of things in here that with this particular piece of work in mind, because this is the one obviously that we're paying attention to right now. I want to keep most of the darks up at this end. I'm going to try to find some other darker valued colors where I can get some interest into the zone, and I want to keep these darker darks, I think, up at this end. So I want to transition towards a little bit paler at the other end. And we're going to we'll get some stars, and I also have a little bottle of my own type of white paint that I use. So once I get stars in, I will sometimes go back and add a little extra super duper white right into the middle of it to make them really pop. And so this, like I say, this thing is normally, I'll start at maybe 7 o'clock and I'll get done at about 10 o'clock on one of these. We're trying to accelerate this pace a little bit here, and conveniently it's on one that I have never done before. So I'm going to cast a little bit of flying shadow from this thing up the side of this. These are little opportunities for lighting effects that you get a feeling that you need them, you know, where there's this little bit of light sneaking by. We're going to add some little hot catches of light on this. I want a couple of little pieces that look like they sneak through from around other pieces of stuff that are hanging in here. So I got to be really careful that I don't cause too much distraction, but you need those. And I'll put a little bit of extra light right in there, just so that we get that effect of the light sneaking by this stuff. Let's see, where's that? I got so many colors. Let's see, I'm going to put a little bit more of this. I had originally visualized that this ship might be almost semi-rusty, but I kind of abandoned that because it's not a very realistic thought for something out in space. Not going to be a lot of rusting going on, but it didn't stop them in Star Wars. But so you could do it.
We have a student asking,
Mm-hmm.
how do you deal with self-doubt and the fear of,
That's a really good one.
the fear of screwing up something that's possibly for a client or
It's a big hurdle, and I'm every time I do one of these demos, I'm right up to my throat in worry, and it's not that I'm never going to see any of you guys, probably, but you know, you're supposed to be pretty good at this stuff, and you certainly don't want to come off as a hack. So self-doubt, man, you got to learn to live with that one. It gets better, though. That's the good news. You get, as you get victories under your belt, you start to believe more in yourself. That sounds hokey, but it's true. You eventually, you say, that's going to be tough, but I think I can do it. You know, I think I'll pull it off somehow. And that's what you continue to cruise on. You know, that's the stuff that saves you. But they're and this is an overused expression too, but baby steps. That's what it takes. I have lost my drawing on these little some little seams. I I keep trying to keep my pencils segregated here so I don't get completely lost. I'm going to have to go back, look at this, and get myself a little pencil. And I'm going to hand draw these in so that and you notice this is a fairly dull pencil. That's what I want. I don't want anything to, see, I can see approximately where it comes off. It's all going to go to this little center point right in this circle. So as we come around, we want it to end up going through that little circle and coming out the other side and going back around. So, and let's see, we want this about halfway between this and this. So that's, and this again comes from drawing a lot, so that you get to the point where you can not look too bad pretty quick. Okay, so we got that. Now, is this thing out of ink? I hope not. I mean, I've got cartridges, so no, it doesn't seem to be out of ink. Yeah, I think it was just a little bit of Prismacolor or something that got caught in the end. Okay, get this. Notice I'm not doing a continuous line, I'm doing little dots along the way. It's a much easier way to control a crazy curve and follow it than it is to try to do a nice, long, smooth, perfect. I mean, I just got to admit, I'm not that good at that. Okay. Okay, that's not too bad. Okay, then we can, now we're going to have to go in here and do some more gewgaws in this little area right in here, because this is where we're closest to, and that's where most of the detail is going to be. Add a little bit more dark value into there as we come through this. Okay. I take my hat off to anybody that can sit and watch somebody work on something like this for more than 5 minutes. I mean, I could run screaming out of the room right now. So if you're still interested, I take my hat off to you.
How do you know when
I'm done?
when you're getting to that end point, you know?
It's when you start to say, damn, that looks pretty good. That's kind of the,
Awesome.
that's kind of the, that's the point you're looking for.
I've heard Eric say that he kind of knows when he's done, when he feels like it says what he meant to say.
Yeah, I think that's it. You know, you look at it and it's kind of like you're salting soup. You know, you just say, that tastes pretty good. You know, and that's when you stop using salt, you know. I mean, it's kind of that easy. Adding a little bit of orange in here. We're going to have to, I'm going to do the pencil's really good because with the pencil you can do these lines and get out that out of there. So this one comes through like that. This is just kind of I had done when I was back in hot rod days long ago. I did pinstriping, so I kind of developed a feel for sweeping lines that has actually worked out pretty good. And now I'll go back and do this with a pen and ink. And I've got to put some color in the sky as well. So see that. If I could turn this board around, I could. The idea you want is you want to be able to go like that. A sweeping action. It's kind of like a tennis stroke. Okay, I'm gonna get rid of that one. Got to be careful when you're erasing around your ink too. Give it time enough to dry, boy, because you can smear it and oops, not good. Okay, I got to find some. Believe it or not, I think I'm going to use some pink. And we'll take the just to add a little bit of, bring some yellow back into it as well. The nice part about this middle value background is that you can just skate across it with a little thin coating of this stuff, and it starts to have a different color all of its own. It's a combination of the greenish gray of that. And if it gets a little too heavy at some point, you can come back in and just lightly scuff over it with your kneaded eraser, and that works pretty good. And let's see if I can find let's try a little more yellow. Makes an interesting noise, doesn't it? Okay. And get the cream now. And figure out where to put my these things. Really, these little star shapes really start to generate some interesting feeling in the piece.
Robert, do you ever have artistic slumps or periods of time where you have a
Sure.
hard time finding out what to draw or wanting to draw anything?
Oh yeah, there are days when I can't do anything right. One of the things that I with sketching and drawing in all of these projects, one thing I found was really helpful was to use cheap lined paper that you buy at stationery stores, Staples, those kind of places where you get just the cheap stuff that, it's bound at the top and you rip off the sheet and throw it in the trash can. That's the stuff that really works, boy. I mean, to get your thought press good, because you can't wreck that ugly crap. It's just already junk, so you can't do anything. I've done some of my best drawings on that stuff and wished I'd done it on better paper. But it's a really liberating experience. I mean, you don't get, when you're working on your sketchbook, you've paid X dollars for. You don't want to wreck a page, So you're nervous. That's not a good atmosphere. You don't want to be afraid to wreck the paper. And as you get more successful and you get a little bit more money, it's less sacrosanct. You really don't care anymore that much. You hate to ruin it, but it's mostly, at this point in my career, it's mostly lost time that I'm most ticked off about on when I do a bad work. It's not like, oh, I hate myself, although I've had a few little days like that occasionally. But most of the time, it's after you've been a professional for a number of years, you're trying to get jobs done, get it billed, get it out the door, get on to the next job. And when you have a slump day, it's just a pain in the hind end. It's not near so much that you hate yourself, it's that you hate the time that you just wasted that should be leading toward finished work, and it ain't working out that way. So it's really odd the way things tend to change as you move on through your career, the things that are really important right now. But I mean, it's you're going to have those times when you're just not really doing your best work, and of course you have to get to a point where you can do best work before you realize that you aren't doing it anymore. So at the beginning, for all of us, none of it's best work. It's sort of better, not very good. I mean, you go through all that stuff, and it's if you're going through that as we speak right now, you're not the Lone Ranger. I mean, it's that way for everybody. Good grief! This is hard, and you expect a little bit of that, along the way. Just trying to keep from beating up on yourself is probably the best thing. You just and don't pour. Another piece of really good advice for you is don't pour good money after bad. If you've got something that's not working, start over right away. Don't waste any more time on it. The minute you see that you can't do anything to improve it is the time to get out. Hit the silk. Get out of that thing. And try to figure out what you were doing wrong. Obviously, that's really important. It usually comes down to crappy drawing. That's usually it, and this is kind of an aside to all of this, but I see, what was I going to say here? I was starting to look at a problem here, and I lost my mind for a second there. Gee, I can't remember. That's awful. What was I talking about? Help me out, Lucas.
Well, we were talking about having down days and just needing to get the work out.
Yeah, it's. I guess when you I know exactly what I was going to say. When you're drawing something, there's always one part of it that you're feeling very insecure about. Could be a hand, could be a face, could be one figure, it could be pectoral muscles, it could be the dragon's wings, I don't care. And the thing that you want to do with your work is do that first. The thing that is worrying you will continue to worry you, and you do not want to spend 25 hours doing the rest of the work really nice, only to shoot yourself in the backside with that one thing that you always knew you would not be able to pull off. Now, I hope that's good information for you, but pay attention and remember that. Go right to the hard part and figure it out. Get it solved. And if you can't solve it, you might as well throw the whole thing that you're planning to do away, because it is not going to get better. You have to solve that. So go with the net. So if you get that really tough hand drawn and it looks good, the rest will be like a walk in the park.
So Bob, what made you want to do this side project in space? What was the...
Oh, well, I've always been a science fiction reader. I mean, lots of science fiction. I mean, I have read it continually my whole life, and so I guess probably the recent incarnation of this whole thing was probably The Expanse on Sci-Fi, and that got me all reignited about this whole thing. It was done so well. I decided that it was about time to take a swing at this. I'd done a few science fiction things that, just along the way that came out okay. But it was one of those things which when you look back on things, you say, oh, that's what happened. But if you go back to that moment in time without looking back on it, if you're right in the middle of it again, you don't see any of that stuff happening. So like I started out to write a novel, decided that I wasn't a good writer, and I would concentrate just on the basic story and hold it with drawings. So that's where I'm ending up. That's why it happened. If I had been a phenomenal writer, the essay king, I probably never would have contemplated a graphic novel at all. I'm just going to put a few lines in here to get this. Okay, I'm going to go. It's coming along okay. It could stand to have like 5 extra hours thrown into it, but we don't have that, do we, folks? So let's see. What am I looking for? A little different color. Add just a little bit of something we don't have right now into this. And I'm going to punch these little stars that we're seeing in the background peeking through the dust clouds. Much of this stuff, 17 different colors could work in this particular spot. But what you're really looking for is I've got a little bit of pink going to a little bit of a greenish feel. Got a little bit of purple going to a little bit of a yellow. So you're kind of playing with complements a little bit along the way. Okay.
So with the imagined end product of the graphic novel, is it all going to be colored pencils, or what are you thinking?
No, I'm doing it all in black, white, a little bit of crosshatch, not too much. Trying to stay as let's see, Magnola's work,
Okay.
that kind of a little more graphic, but still bringing a little bit of the sketchbook feel into it. So there are an enormous number of people that were really good at this stuff. It's madness for me to think I can compete out there, but hey, you got to be mad sometimes. Whoops, didn't want to do that. Kneaded eraser, God love it. Save your bacon a lot. Okay, I've got to get these little, let's see, how did I swing that? A couple of lines that show that this thing is hooked to that. I have to reinforce a couple of lines periodically here. pardon my head if I cover this up every now and again. So you don't have to be with these little wiggles and technical things that are happening inside these openings. You don't have to be ultra super duper sophisticated with the whole thing. Okay. Let's see where.
What is that pen that you were using?
This one?
Yeah.
It's a Rot Ring art pen, and they're not expensive. They're like $14, something like that. And you can get them on Amazon, which makes it easy. You used to have it at Blick's, but they quit carrying them. But you could probably get it at Jerry's. You probably could actually get it at Blick online if you, but you know, just try any Rot Ring, R-O-T-R-I-N-G, Rot Ring art pen. And the fine point I've found to be the best. Ultra fine's just too damn fine. And the other one's too broad. It's better for calligraphy. Try to beef up these lines just a little bit so that we've got a little bit more contrast. Okay, I want to get.
Can you talk a little bit about the new courses that you're involved in that are coming out soon?
There are the one that's coming up this next semester, and this is in the brick and mortar school. It's already available online. Is designing the environment. That's a really, I mean, I spent a lot of time trying to analyze. The big problem is that we like either airplanes, race cars, sexy girls, dragons, you name it. But we tend to forget that they have to be somewhere. They can't just be, you know, I mean, they can occasionally just be floating on their own and pull it off. But most of the time they need to be in a location. And, you know, I don't care whether it's Fairyland, Times Square, Mars, doesn't matter. You've got, if you're going to put them on Mars, you got to figure out what Mars should look like to your story. So that one's a really good one. The telling the story, we haven't done that online yet, but that's one I'm talking to Jeff about stirring up. That's a really good one. But the one thing about the designing the environment is that I determined in the course of trying to establish what makes it work, what makes the environment work, that all stories fall into four genres: hostile, mystical or mysterious, romantic, or tranquil. All of them. Every story from here to the moon is in one of those four categories. You know, you take hostile is anything from a torture chamber to World War to rock climbing to slacklining to, I mean, name it. So it goes all the way from deliberately hostile to just bloody dangerous. It also includes everything, including tsunamis, rock falls, explosions, tornadoes, anything you care to name. So that's all hostile. And then the mysterious is just mysterious for a while, and then you push it a little bit further and it becomes spooky, and you get a little further and it becomes horror. And so all of that stuff works in one little group. So anyway, you got like these four genres, and they accept everything in the universe. So it's important to you as an illustrator to determine what is the genre that my thing is in? What kind of an image am I trying to produce here? I mean, you can't tell a horror story and make it look like a birthday party. You know, you have to understand what you're working on and what it needs to do, and what are the things that make those various feelings look like they do. And then on top of it all, then you have, it's just going back almost to composition and the motifs, but you have shapes of environments that things happen in, like under an overhang, on a ridge, on a pinnacle, at the toe of a slope, oh my gosh, on a slope. Once you take all of these conditions, and in your mind or on a piece of paper as an outline, you start to take these things and you solidify them, and you say, okay, I'm in a hostile environment. Where's it going to look best where's this hostile environment look best in? A confined space, in a tube, in a canyon, with two walls pressing in me on either side. What is going to best help me make this look dangerous and hostile? So designing the environment is a series of decisions that you make, and you keep eliminating things that you say, no, that wouldn't work, that's not going to work, that might work, that one has a good chance to work, and you narrow the list down, and you eventually, instead of just sitting there staring at a blank piece of paper, hoping that in some fleeting moment you will become brilliant and do everything correct, it's much better to have a system that you go through. You see, the first thing, I need to do this, then I need to do that, then I need to do the next thing, and make sure that that does that. And once I'm sure that those things are in place, this thing is going to work. And so designing the environment. I was with a group of guys that back in the early 90s, and I was on a rage doing aviation paintings. Excuse me. The thing that I noticed once I joined these guys, and I was better than most of them, I had already been doing work for a long time, so I was already pretty good. But the thing that I noticed was that these guys were really good at rendering airplanes, but their pictures just sucked. They were terrible. It's just like you paint this beautiful precision airplane, and then you say, oh heck, I need a sky around this. Well, that's not exactly the way to approach things, you know. So you want to start out figuring out what your whole situation looks like for your artwork when you're doing it, not just the pretty part that you're so in love with. And you have to understand that it needs to be in a functioning environment. The composition has to work. The perspective has to be right. The darks and the lights. There's a lot of things to learn about portraying anything. And the most important part is to make sure you do have a center of interest, and that everything else isn't stealing that center of interest away from the thing that you really wanted to talk about. And so many pieces of work do that. And so many of the conceptual pieces that I see, there's a lot of really absolutely wonderful stuff out there. And there's some really well-rendered crap. It's like they didn't know when to stop. They just render everything. And your actual eye can only focus on something the size of a dime at arm's length. Everything else is out of focus. And yet, with our paintings, we make it look as though we have perfect focus in every direction. And then you got no center of interest. You're in a candy store. There's candy everywhere. And there's so much stuff that you can't even buy anything because you just can't decide, and you go crazy. You know, so if you, there's a lot of things that I talk about frequently in my classes. There's old cinematography expressions that are really good. And one of the most important is if you don't want to see it, don't light it. And that's that's really, I mean, that's just a critical piece of knowledge that will make all of your work look lots better if you understand that. You say, what do I want them to look at? And I am probably failing in that regard on this one, actually, a little bit. So, you know, I'm only human as well, but it's really difficult to get everything on the page handled so that you don't distract from what you originally thought you were trying to sell. So it's something you really have to pay attention to. I think probably I'm going to pretty much, I think, get a drink of water and call this one probably pretty much done. I was looking to see if I had a paintbrush in here. I may have taken off in my zeal and forgotten to include one of those. If I did, I can't add the little sharp white highlights. Ah, I did bring it. All right.
Robert, would you still consider this a sketch?
Oh yeah, absolutely. No, this is not a finished piece of work. It's not bad, but at this point, what really, gosh, I made a mess out of that. Sometimes the eraser I got so much Prismacolor on it. I think that's what's causing the problem. Should have.
So if you were to take it to a finished piece, would you consider doing something like this in gouache then? And
Yeah. Oh, sure. Yeah, I would. If it isn't part of the. Let me get that. So many things can go wrong, eh, Lucas?
yeah.
Just gotta. I don't want to do too many of these, but just a few that are. This is Dr. Martin's Bleed Proof White. Best white in the world for gouache or anything similar to gouache. And if it ever dries up in the bottle, you just add a little water, stir it back up. I think it's got some kind of a milk or casein base kind of mixed in with it. You know, that's got to be careful you don't overdo a sweet thing like I was talking about earlier. So now let me see if there's anything else we can do with this quickly. It's so hard to be bulletproof on the run like this. I don't think it's bad, but I just you could use a little more time. That's for sure. Yeah, I would like to work on the sun there a little bit to get a little bit more spunk into that. But I don't want to spend an enormous amount of time doing that. I'm just kind of going over the top of these stars with a little bit of the yellow, which will have a tendency to quiet them down just a touch, make them a little foggier and ghost-like. Put a little bit more yellow into that. I think that's probably about as good as that one's going to get in without just spending a whole lot of extra time for minimal results. I'm going to get a glass of water and rinse a little paint off my hand, and then we'll do a pirate ship with the cannons blazing. Okay?
Excellent.
All right. Be back in 1 second. Okay, we're back. I've got a pencil drawing here of a pirate ship. We're gonna see what we can do in 1/2 hour. So keep that in mind. It's obviously an old pirate galleon, and we're going to start with the gunfire. So let's get that established first, because we don't want to cover up where the gunfire is. So that's really important that we get this established early on in the game. And then I'm going to get the clouds of smoke established. And like I said, it's a 1/2 hour project, so we got to make good decisions quick as hell here. And we'll figure out what we got to do with the, want a little bit of orange, but you don't want to be hokey with this stuff either. So just a little bit of the illusion of fire. And we're going to just want to get that roughly in position there. Okay. I'm going to go in here real early on this one with the pen and ink work and get this thing, because we've got to get results really fast this time. Get these. This was, I didn't invent this. I've done some things for class where I would do a total invention right on the spot, and I'm reasonably good at that. But in this one, I used a piece of reference on a model. It was a model ship that had been built by someone. And it was just a very cool shot, and it had nice rhythm to it. So I said, why are we going to make a project out of this? But I did draw it by hand, no tracing or any of that funny nonsense. So I can still keep my head straight up in the air about it. I've got the actual photo of the model here, but I'm going to spare you that. It was really mostly useful from a standpoint that it helped me with where the rigging goes, where the lines and all the key pieces. You know, you gotta, if you're not a shipbuilder, you gotta have a little help. Okay. And this stuff, we can treat this kind of like a sketchbook, and that's really the way they ought to be done, so that you don't over fussy render these things. So. Right. We're going to have some reflections in the water here. So now I got to get along here. And that established. Doing these big, long curves, it's best to do them as a series of short, straight lines. And I'm never opposed to using a ruler to help me out on that a little bit. You don't have to do it much, but it really does make a difference if you're, let's see, this is, do. Okay. I'm going to put a little bit of tone in here. Well, Okay, get all the massing build up there a little bit, and we'll
Robert,
yeah.
what's your favorite medium?
Oh,
And what do you work in, or what have you tried before?
pencil would be number one. Number two is probably gouache. I like gouache a lot. I enjoy oil a lot. Watercolor, I like it, but I'm not brilliant at it. I'm working on it. You try to be good at everything, but sometimes that's a tall order. It's. But I would say I'm most absolutely comfortable with pencil. I mean, that's the way my brain thinks, and these other things follow close on its heels. But yeah, I think that there's things about each one of them that is absolutely captivating, and the others can't seem to do everything. So you really have to, you can't resist it, I don't think, as an artist. I think you say, I got to give that a spin. That looks really good, and each one of them has a wonderful little catalog of things that they're really good at as a medium, and some things that they just can't do as well. So it's, so the intermixed media, I guess, at some point, which is kind of like where we start mixing this this pencil drawing with some Prismacolor, and then we say, well, we need the ink to give it some snap, and yeah, it's kind of like that. I think that probably gouache was a medium that was the medium of choice, along with oil, when I first got into the business. So you pretty much had to learn how to use gouache. But I don't use it quite like the normal human beings do. So mine's kind of almost watercolorish, but not quite. On my website, my general illustration website, which is robertwattsconceptsketches.com, there's a wide variety of the stuff that I've done. There's a lot of gouache stuff in there, and that's kind of where all kinds of odd pieces end up that I'm working on currently, and things that are good that I've done in the past, or at least I think they're good. Never really too sure about that stuff. Okay, here we're going to do a little bit of quickie Greeky scrolling in there, just to get the illusion of scroll work without actually going to all the bother. I'm going to drop a little bit of orange into this reflection here, and then we're going to, pardon my having the brush in my mouth there for a second. You make these mistakes every now and again when you're on live. Okay, so, all right. We're going to get the illusion of a whole bunch of rigging and stuff here, but I'm going to do it really fast. I think that try to get this. This is a tall order here as well, you know, to try to get the illusion of drifting smoke, and you got a lot of little tricky things to try to pull off in a flash. And I've got like about 20 minutes left to get all of this handled. So
There's a question about some of your background. You mentioned that you did some graphic design, or was it logo design?
oh yeah, I did all that kind of stuff. I went to Pratt Institute for graphic design, and that was before I knew that I didn't really want to do that full time. But at the same time, the things that you learn about type and composition on the page, and first read, second read, third read, all of those things are really important. And the thing that you discover after a while with illustration art in general is that it doesn't matter whether it's writing a song, doing choreography for a dance routine, set design. It's all the same. Writing a symphony, everything is the same. It's all lost and found, simple against complex, center of interest, pacing and variety. I mean, all these things, they're common to everything. And so if you really like music, start thinking about what it is about that music that you like, and you'll find that the same things you will like in illustration if you include those in your work. So it's like, you know, too much loud, no loud. You know, I mean, these are all things that have to be considered when you're doing a piece. So obviously everything doesn't want to be the center of interest, and that would be the same if it were a set design for a Broadway play, if it were a passage in a symphony. All the same, absolutely the same. And there are only so many things that we can respond to in life, and it's usually contrast. That's the thing that grabs our head. If everything stays the same through its entirety, we get bored. And if we don't have a center of interest, we lose interest. I mean, it's all very predictable stuff. Okay. I'm just going to drop these lines straight down through here in the interest of getting this thing accomplished. Okay, so now we can go in here and get a little bit more rhythm into this water here. This is an example of doing random. And I'm going to have to take my orange, and I'm going to have to add a little bit in a speck here and there that are not part of that original blur of orange. Okay. This is the equivalent of in digital work speed painting. Let's see. There's another spar right in here somewhere. This thing's got more sails on it than anything I've ever seen in my life. It does. It's got just a fistful of them. I think I'll try drawing those by hand. What I don't want to use a ruler for everything. That's stupid. Okay, let's see that. I think I'm going to have to do it for that one though. In the interest of making sure that everything lines up. They're just like, they're quick little strokes, so they're not really. They're just, it's kind of like, more like guidelines.
Question for you, Robert.
Yeah.
While coloring a piece, do you use the local color of the object as a middle value and then color in the highlights of the shape?
I think that's generally a good idea. Okay. Yeah, something that's kind of neutral and, you know, like if it was a tree, you would pick the kind of an average between the darkest dark and the lightest light of the greens. And that would be your middle value. You kind of start out by lightly putting that in, and that's it's a placeholder, and it generally works pretty good. But you can also key a painting to any color scheme that you like. So you may say, well, that tree is green, but I've keyed this entire painting to yellow, you know, or so you have to modify your color a little bit if you do that. But but generally speaking, yeah, I mean, you start out with the rules and break them later. So, you know, if you, it's best to stay somewhere in the general vicinity of truth at the beginning. And later on, when you get arrogant and full of yourself, you can start busting out, you know, and trying some things and say, well, I never did like that anyway, so I'm going to do it my way from now on. And you can get away with it, finally. But let's see, we've got to get a little bit. And this, what's important about what I'm doing right here is the edge. It's an overall shape all around here. And it has to be pocket size. It has to be able to float as a unit. Kind of tricky, but you don't want tricky stuff happening all off on the edges where, because one of the most difficult things in this business of illustration is shutting things off. How do I make that stop? You know, and that's most noticeable with like running water. What can I think of? Clouds. All kinds of things that want to continue on and run forever, and you've got to figure out some way to shut them down. And so you have to find a useful boundary line that you can cut it off with. It's like if a mountain range tends to run all the way off the page and just keep going, you can stop it with a tree. And so you find these little tools, little gizmos that you can help you shut something down, and it's a very important part of what we do to make your pictures really look good and make sense. I had a little small triangle. I couldn't find it. I thought I brought it with me, but I didn't, I guess. Okay, and over here on the far side, we got to watch where the so now I'm just going to again, this is the half-hour law here that we're in the middle of, so we have to do these things as quickly as possible. Still kind of try to capture the essence of the thing. So now, and this one, we gotta get this little gizmo. And it's got some stuff over on the other side for that. We got to add some new color, and I got about 15 seconds to do this thing in. This is a real interesting little challenge to do this quickly. It's how you get better, they tell me.
When you spend
2 hours
Okay.
to do it right. Okay, now I'm just gonna, in order to keep this looking like a reflection, I'm going to run my pencil strokes vertically, which is going to help too. I've got to get some lights in here as well, but what this reflection gives me, I was talking about how do I shut things off. Well, I shut it off with, instead of painting and drawing the whole ocean, I only paint the reflection and the wake. And then the rest of it is this cloud of smoke. I'll try to get a little bit more variety into that real quickly so that it doesn't look like water. Okay. So far, so good. All right. I'm gonna couple of little chunks of light in here, and we don't need to go vertically. This is foam, so we can just do a couple of strokes out there at the end so that it shuts off kind of gracefully. Okay. Let's see, what do I want for, I need another color. I want to get just a little bit of something different on this. Okay, we'll go back.
Are you working on any other projects at all, other than the graphic novel?
Well, I have my normal commercial work, which is generally architectural in nature. Had a client a million years ago, and he was big time in the Mormon church. And so he's got a temple for me to do by the 10th. He's a great architect, really good. It gets a little obnoxious sometimes, but his architecture is good. So you always end up with a good sample out of it at the very least, So it's not the kind of thing that I do a lot of. I've probably done 4 or 5 churches in my entire career, and I've done 3,000 architectural renderings. So I've done a bunch. And so they're a small part of the business. And I'm the main conceptual artist for the San Diego Zoo Global. And so I do a lot of work for them. And
Then you teach, of course.
I teach a course, yeah. But like I say, it's mostly architectural renderings outside of my other stuff. that's why, after you draw 6 million windows, you start aching for something a little different, in your life. But it does keep bread on the table, so and it's done a damn good job of that. So let me see here now. Yeah, and how you get started in stuff. It's just it is so different for everybody, and the way my career started never happened for you. And I've talked with a bunch of people on this topic, and I say, it comes down to really strange things like you rear end somebody in an intersection, and it turns out to be a publisher or something. It's just, life is so weird that you can't even, all you can do is get good, let everybody you can possibly tell without them vomiting what it is that you do for a living, and just get it out there, get good, Try everything you can think of to be visible, and expect the unexpected, because it is going to come. And it'll just come from out of left field. You know, you think, you say, oh, he did it that way, so I'm going to do it that way. No. Just try it for sure, but don't count on any of the things that work for somebody else working for you, nor can they count on the things that work for you working for them. So it's going to be, that's the fun part about it, not knowing what's going to happen next with this stuff, though. It's great. It's really, life is pretty good in that regard. It'll surprise you, irritate you, do all kinds of other things, but basically it's fun. Okay, let's see, I got to get some more of these little things in here, and I got to get some out. In 5 minutes, I've got to invent some more color. Now I could dump this thing in, I could get a horizon on it, but that opens up a can of worms. And I don't, because if I do the horizon, I got to figure out how to shut it off. I don't know if shutting off things makes any sense to you, or if you've ever heard it before. But if you start thinking about it, you're going to find out that what I'm saying is correct. I mean, it really, I mean, all old guys say that everything they say is the truth and believe it and all that, but that is. Learn how to shut things off. Oh my God, that's important. I'm going to do a little bit of pen and ink work in there, just a touch to.
So when you're referring to shutting it off, you're referring to
How do I end a thing?
the visual movement of the eye through the piece and the composition, and how to move them back into the piece instead of.
Yeah, and I mean, it's like a lot of things say, I want to go on forever, you know? And an ocean is one of them. A river is another. A sky is another. Now, if I say, you know, that I want to add the horizon in here, first of all, I got to know where it is. But if I say it's, oh, that's wrong pencil there. Where's a regular pencil, folks? There it is. Okay, I'll just say that. Okay, there's a horizon there. So that's, I don't want that much over there, but I could. Let's see, this little thing's got to do a little bit more of a blow there, and there's a flag right here, so I better put that in to figure out where that is before I do the rest of this. Okay, I'm just gonna. Now see, how do I shut this mountain off now? By bringing a line back in from the edge. And we'll put some little illusion of some little stuff in there, like village on a hillside. So now I'm just going to put a straight line through here, a couple of straight lines. Get one, I can take this one over just a little bit further. Okay, and where did that slate grave? Okay. Okay. And we'll, just to keep that from being too desperately boring, we'll put a couple of little bright spots on it and a little bit of A little light streak through the water. Okay. So you can see what I did there was I got a little indication sort of a reflection from that, and a little light line of wind on the water running through that there. But that little cut in here where it goes here comes back in towards the center of interest. So what happens beyond out here is no longer of any interest. So we don't care what is happening over there. We still have the mountain, but it ends. And so we keep it attached to this superstructure of the boat. So there's nothing off by itself happening here. So I hope that makes some sense to you. Maybe make you think of things in a slightly different way. And learning how to do that just takes a lot of really ugly things that you do. And you every now and again you'll accidentally do something really nice, and those are the keepers. And eventually, if you live long enough, you accumulate a real big stack of these things that you can lean on from that point forward. And that's when life starts to get a little tiny bit easier. But you got to have experiences, you know. I mean, like Yoda said, you know, failure is the best teacher. That's the one you learn from. The good things just go right on past you. But the mistakes that you make, the things where you stub your toe, those are the ones you remember. I think we just about blew all the time we have. That's about the best I can do in this length of time.
Excellent.
Okay? So folks, thanks for those of you who are still here. I appreciate it. Thank you very much, and best of luck with all of this. And check out composition and staging and creating and designing the environment. They will help you out. Draw like crazy.